Okay, everyone, you are welcome to the Nigerian Center Immigration Rights Workshop. I want to start a few housekeeping announcements that this meeting is being recorded. If you object to being recorded, you may disconnect at this time. My name is Benga Ogunjimi. I am the founder and the executive director of the Nigerian Center. It gives me great joy to welcome you to our today's immigration Know Your Rights workshop. I want to talk a little bit about the Nigerian Center. If you're joining us for the very first time, or if you're catching this as a replay, the Nigerian Center is the very first Nigerian American community immigrant center located in the nation's capital. Our mission is to foster financial inclusion and provide connection to the Nigerian culture here in the United States. To do so, we have identified a few areas of asset building for our programs and services. We do have an immigration program that you're participating today. The program allows access to legal resources and also an opportunity to have necessary tools and resources folks might need navigating immigration system in the United States. We've been holding the monthly Know Your Right workshops. And if you missed or if you want to be updated with all of the services we've provided in the past, I encourage you to go to our website on the media to catch the recordings of our previous workshop. We do have access to capital program providing microloans for credit building and for business startup opportunities. The loans are from $500 to $250,000. We have a home ownership program geared towards those who are buying their very first home and exposing them to resources in various cities across the country that provides financial support for those who are trying to own their first home. We have language classes as well, providing language classes in Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and we periodically hold cultural events. Some of them are virtual and some of them are in-person meet and greet. So today's workshop is going to be delivered by our immigration attorney at the Nigerian Center, Mr. Melvin Jarrett. He's going to be speaking about the topic domestic violence and immigration. We also have the honor of having to also contribute to the seminar workshop, Dr. Grace. Dr. Grace is one of the founders of NANNNA, which is the National Association for Nigerian Nurses in North America. She's going to be telling us about the history of that organization and how domestic violence was one of the issues that led to the establishment, and they still continue to work on. Tomorrow, actually, we are holding our Access to Capital workshop, and it's going to be on building personal credit and business and personal credit. We are also going to be going through our financial resources for those who might need access to capital for their business or for their credit to be able to access financial resources at the Nigerian Center. On October 4th, towards the Nigerian Independence Day, the mayor of Washington, D.C. is declaring October 1st as Nigerian American Day. And the Tuesday of that, we're holding a press conference in Washington, D.C. More details about that will be coming soon. I want to recognize our supporter for this event, which is TapTapSend, who has been generous to provide us support so that we can continue to provide these services. We do have all the videos of our workshops on demand on nigeriancenter.org/media. I encourage you to go there so you can catch up on all of our previous videos of the workshops that we've done. Particularly towards immigration, we've done a treatment of the employment-based immigration, family-based immigration, humanitarian-based immigration. You can access those recordings on the website. We are currently accepting application for various volunteer positions. If you go to the website _serve@nigeriancenter.org, you can find our current volunteer opportunities. We recently opened our community partners. This is where we deepen our connection to community grassroots organizations serving the Nigerian American community. Please consider to check that program out. This is where you really advise us and give us direction how best to respond to the pain points of the community. If you're not following us on social media, please do so at Nigerian Center. Donations as well, if you want to consider donating to Nigerian Center, particularly if you want to consider being a recurring donor. Nigerian Center at this time is an all-volunteer-led team, including myself, and your donation help us to stay afloat. October 1st, we are opening our walk-in immigration clinic in Washington, D.C. We are holding a press conference towards that. At this point, we're able to serve those in Washington, D.C. and those who may come from other parts of the country, but it's geared primarily towards Washington, D.C. So with your support, we can expand the program. Okay, so that said, I'm going to turn it over to our speaker for today. I'm going to start with Mrs. Grace, Dr. Grace rather, the founder of NANNA. Dr. Grace, could you please come to the microphone, and I can stop sharing my screen if you have a PowerPoint to share. But in the meantime, let me quickly make you a co-host so you're able to do so.
Thank you so much, for having me. I appreciate you for putting this together. I know it's not easy, but we have to do this for our community, and I see it's a lot of program, that you are doing already, so I'm focusing on domestic violence in our community, so I'm going to share my slides, and I will talk about the organization. I'm one of the founding members of National Association of Nigerian Nurses in North America, and I am the founder of Nigerian Nurses Association USA New York. So New York chapter is one of the chapters of the National Association of Nigerian Nurses in North America. So we came together 2002 when I started Nigerian Nurses Association in New York, was because of health problems, a priority that our Nigerian community they were not paying attention to their health, and a lot of preventive chronic diseases was impacting our community. And that was how I brought the nurses together so we can provide health information to Nigerians wherever they are gathered. With my assessment, I found out that Nigerians, we do not have geographical location in New York. So the goal was to bring the health information wherever they are gathered, either at the church, community activities. And that was how we started providing preventive screening, blood pressure, for hypertension, for diabetes, and also providing referrals, to clinical areas. But however, that was 2002. But in between 2005 and 2007, there was something going on in the Nigerian community. A lot of Nigerian women were being killed by Nigerian men. And by 2008, it was at the peak. And it was brought to our attention that about 8 Nigerian nurses were killed by their husbands here in the US. That caught our attention as Nigerian nurses. So we now came together, to now also focus on domestic violence in our community, and that was how the National Association was started, because other Nigerian association that was also providing preventive health, focusing on screening, we now have to come together, to focus on domestic violence. So over the years, I'm going to go through what we'll be doing and the research that we'll be carrying out and our findings and how we can help to stop this cancer in our community. First of all, let's look at domestic violence. The United Nations defined domestic violence as an act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm or suffering to women, including threats, to their lives. So you can look at domestic violence is not only in the Nigerian community, it's global. But I'm going to focus on the impact it's having in our community and how widespread and what we can do and what we are doing to stop it. Intimate partner violence refers to behavior by an intimate partner that causes physical or sexual or psychological harm. Sexual violence is also part of it, and a sexual act attempt to obtain sexual act or other act directed against personal sexuality using coercion by any person, regardless of their relationship to the victim in any setting. So defining abuse. When we talk about domestic violence, we have to look at it in the context of that. Abuse is a repetitive pattern of behavior to maintain power and control over an intimate partner. And I'm going to talk more about this to discuss what we found when we did our research. These behaviors that are physically harm or arouse fear or prevent partner from doing what they wish to do, is a definition, that National Domestic Violence Outline has defined abuse, repetitive pattern. How huge is this problem? The scope of the problem, domestic violence. Globally, in 2018, the analysis of prevalence data from 2000 and 2018 across 161 countries and areas conducted by World Health Organization found that worldwide, nearly 1 in 3, or 30% of women have been subjected to physical or sexual violence by their partner. Globally, 161 countries, 1 in 3. This is how huge. In the United States, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner during 1 year. This equates to more than 10 million women and men. So I'm sure we hear this all the time, that sometimes now we don't even take it seriously anymore because it becomes like a routine. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. So when we talk about domestic violence, we are not only talking about women, although women are more impacted, which means 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. And we also saw it in our research. This is how huge it is. At least 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men, has experienced violence in their relationship. And it's also costing the United States money, $8.3 billion annual cost of domestic violence and $4.4 trillion annual cost of domestic violence worldwide. Now let's bring it home. Like I said before, that the formation of National Association of Nigerian Nurses in North America came to be because of domestic violence. Because from 2005 to 2008, an epidemic was really impacting the Nigerian community in the United States, and it was domestic violence. 9 Nigerian women were murdered in the US by their husbands, and out of the 9, 7 were nurses. That got us thinking, what is going on here? Why these nurses? So we started to focus on research in our community. So during our national conferences, we made domestic violence a topic. That during our conference, we spend a day to focus on domestic violence, to hear from the men, to hear from the women, to hear from the nurses, to hear from the children. And then we found out a lot of issues there, diverse. And we wanted to focus more on why 7 nurses out of the 9. And a lot of issues came up when we did the research, and when we look at the behavior of the men, and we also look at the behavior of the women, and then we look at the culture, the environment, the culture, the American culture, and then we also look at our culture as Nigerians, as Africans, there. And some of the findings we got was one, in the Nigerian community here in the US, some of the men, when they come here, they work very hard, they put money together, and then they go back to Nigeria and they marry the women, what that was common among them, to bring them to the US. Some already nurses in Nigeria, some they bring them here, and the first few years they are here, they don't let them work. They make sure they go to school. They find out that when they go to school, they do nursing, they are able to get the job. So for those individuals who went to marry these women, they're not marrying them because they love or out of love or whatever. They already have in their mindset what they want to do. They want to bring somebody who can easily get a job and start working. And what we saw with some of these women is that once they start working, these men now see them as ATM machine, as quoted by one of the incident. Once they bring them, they tell them, I've spent so much money on you, it's my turn, or return on investment. These are quotes from some of these men that actually killed their husband. And one was especially the one from California. After he killed the wife, he tied the body to the car and drove around the town and said, this, the individual that has messed up my life. So they go to Nigeria, marry them and bring them here. And once they start working as nurses, they take the money from them. In one situation, is the man that will not give what they call pocket money to the woman. However, it's the woman who goes to work, but now they take over their lives. Unfortunately for some of them, once the woman gets to the culture of this system, they now realize that, no, I have a say. I should have a say. And that brings us also to the other area we find that culture aspect, where this individual will say, well, I am the man of the house. Whatever I say goes. So I spend a lot of money on you and I'm getting my money back. So these were some of the findings. And then we now started working with some of the men that, yes, you go home to bring these women and maybe they don't want to be nurses. Why are we forcing them to go into nursing? So, but for them, they are looking at return on their investment, and that was causing a lot of problems. So we started to create a lot of activities in the community, to help reduce violence in our community. And if we look at from 2011 to 2021, every year we have a theme for domestic violence in our community. For example, in 2011, we focus on nurses' role in care and prevention on domestic violence. In 2012, we focus on domestic violence in the Nigerian community focus group. This is where we met with the men, the women, the children. We had a focus group and the nurses. 2013, Nigerian nurses' perspective on intimate partner violence among Nigerian nurses. And we started working also with the nurses, how to, because what we find out, as the Nigerian nurse, you're going to work, most of them are going to work, they're going to school, and they have to care for children. When they're doing this, you have to be multitasking, and it becomes very difficult to able to manage like work balance. So we created programs to help these women. Yes, you can go to school, you can be working and also take care of the children. It's an ongoing, but the good thing I'm here to say is that for a few years now, we've not had any death among Nigerian nurses here. We're also working with Yale University. We're collaborating with them on research, and also University of Texas. Our focus is to look at the root cause analysis. Why are these Nigerian men killing their women, and especially nurses? And once we get the root cause analysis, we provide preventive strategies on how to prevent this from happening, providing skill sets for the nurses on how to balance work and the family and the school, and also for the men. Now, how to, when you are married to a nurse, what do you expect? What is going on for those nurses who spend 12 hours on their foot walking. When they get home, then what happened? And then we also took it home because we saw that these men were going to Nigeria to marry these women, bring them here. You didn't bring them to kill them, but so why are we killing them? So we work with Nursing and Midwifery Council, and also we work with Ministry of Health. So in 2014, we actually had a stakeholders meeting on public health awareness and campaign against domestic violence in Nigeria. And that meeting, we were able to come up with a communique, on how to address domestic violence in Nigeria and also to help us here in the US. And a lot of strategies were put in place. And that has really helped us because back in Nigeria too, remember, domestic violence is not being discussed the way it's discussed here. It's not being open. And we were happy to work with the Ministry of Health to make domestic violence a public health issue in Nigeria. And we came up with different activities and the agencies that will be able to work on these activities and then the different time frame that will happen. We work with the police, we work with the female lawyers in Nigeria. We also at that time worked to lobby the National Assembly in Nigeria so that a law can be passed. And that has been ongoing, and one of the areas that I'll really talk about is the law now that is in place, that domestic violence is a crime. In Nigeria, it was passed into law by President Jonathan at that time. And now each state is adopting it. It's adopting these laws in each state. So public enlightenment and education through workshops, we put that together, with the Ministry of Women's Affairs. We work with them to ensure that then the schools of nursing, because these men were going to the school of nursing to get these women to bring them to Nigeria. So those women too, we also find out they want to come to America. They didn't really love these men, but they want to come to America. It became a ticket, get away from poverty. So they married these men to come here. And once they get here, they now realize, no, they didn't want to marry this man. They want to get out of the relationship. But this man has invested. In one case that we actually finally were able to work with the couple was that the woman agreed because the man told her, when you get to the US, I don't want you to work. And she agreed. She agreed because she wants to come to the US. And then she came to the US, she said, no, I want to work. And that became a conflict in their relationship that almost led to the death of that woman. But thank God that we were able to bring conflict resolution, conflict solutions into it, and then they were able to see things in a different way instead of killing. Research on domestic violence in Nigeria is also going on with the Nursing and Midwifery Council, to also enlighten the nurses. We are working with NAM in Nigeria, that is Nursing and Midwifery, NAM, Nursing and Midwifery Association of Nigeria, to also enlighten their nurses, so that seeing a man that you don't know and you're getting married to bring to America, to also understand the implication of that. So there's a lot going on in our community, and this awareness, letting our people know that domestic violence, is affecting not just the couples, but the children. Most of the children from these abusive relationships, they're also ending up in jail. I think maybe the lawyer will speak to that to see how many of Nigerian children are in jail right now. And most of them are in foster home because once the woman is killed, the man goes to go to prison. Now the children are in foster care, or they are looking for people in the community to adopt them. So areas of domestic violence we are really looking at is those myths versus the truth. We are encouraging our community to look at it from that perspective, that domestic violence and family violence only occur in working or poorer families. People think, oh no, it can't happen to me. I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, so domestic violence. No, domestic violence cut across all walks and lives. It doesn't matter who you are, but unfortunately, individual. We're now trying to pin it to individual what is going on in their lives. So if people are having domestic violence in their relationship, what is going on. There is cause of that situation. We need to look at it. Domestic violence and family violence happens in all communities from all social and cultural groups. Even I think was it in DMV in Maryland that one of the it's a lawyer that was killed by her husband too a few years ago. So it cut across. So it wasn't only nurses, that were being killed in America, but we have that high number. Violent men cannot control themselves. Their behavior is out of their control. That is not true. If men cannot control violence, why is it it's only home that they have that violence against their loved ones? Why don't they have the violence in the workplace? Women enjoy being abused, otherwise they will leave the situation. This is an area that we are focusing on because, yes, people are not dying anymore. However, the violence is still there. The abuse is still happening in our homes, but some women, again, have to bear because go to our culture is that they don't want to leave the relationship because if they become single parents, in some culture is being frowned upon. And in our culture, in our community, single parent is being frowned upon. So these women don't leave. And sometimes we want to stigmatize them because they don't, they are not married. We stigmatize women that are not married in our community. So they are forced to stay in the abusive relationship. Financial situation is also a problem, with some women staying. It's not that they like to be abused, but they're staying because of financial situation. But in some cases with our Nigerian nurses, what we saw was the documentation because we're talking about immigration now, because they don't have the document. What the men were doing, they keep their papers, they take over their documents, so then they don't have nothing to stand on, that they feel that they can't live, they can't survive without that abusive man. Loving, caring partners do not use violence. Again, that is not true. Violence can happen even in the most loving. And we've also seen that sometimes these men abuse these women. They go back and buy flowers for them and start apologizing all over. And another myth is only small numbers of women have experienced domestic violence. We said it already, 1 in 3 to 5 women experience domestic violence. And in our community, domestic violence is high. Domestic violence is rarely spoken about. It is a private family affair. That is one thing that is common in our community. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to discuss it because we stigmatize them. They are ashamed of it. So the women don't want to even discuss it. So they are forced to remain in silence. They remain with the abuser until what happened, they are dead. So we are now saying, no, domestic violence is not a private relationship. Domestic violence is a crime and it's not part of any relationship. There is support and we want to support both partners. For us, domestic violence is a public health issue. So both the man and the woman, they need care. And that is the way we are looking at it from nursing perspective, that this individual that is abusing the other partner needs help. They need help. They need help from medical perspective, and they also need help from the community. We need to stop stigmatizing when people speak up. We need to hear them out. We need to provide hearing, listening ears, to these individuals. And it's not only women. We've also seen where these women are very abusive. We know our mouth, the women run their mouth. So you can see these men. There was a situation where you have this woman telling the man, you should be ashamed of yourself. Look at your friends, your colleagues. They are doctors, they are lawyers, and what you are doing here, you're driving cab. Meanwhile, it was that cab money that this individual, this man, used to file for document for her to bring her to the US. Now she's in the US, she's talking down on this man. So they abuse it. When we talk about domestic violence or intimate partner violence, it goes both ways. Yes, it's more with the women because they speak up. The men don't speak up. So we're also telling the women, you are abusing your partner when you start comparing them with other people in the community. So this is where we are asking that domestic violence is not a private family, because once situation happened that the man is killed or the woman is killed, now the children becomes what? becomes homeless. So women from all backgrounds, all ages, all cultures, employed or unemployed, are likely to be victims of domestic violence. Another myth I will talk about, because the time is short, I was asked to speak for 15 minutes. Women know their rights and can leave the situation if they want to. This is the most difficult. This is the most difficult. What we found out, the truth is a strong sense of silence and secrecy often goes with domestic violence. They don't want to talk about it, so they stay and bear, that. And some, it has to also happen back home. What will my parents say at home? That I left the man. The man went to Nigeria to marry the woman. What is she going to tell them? So these are all things that goes on, so making that decision to leave is not really as easy as those of us looking at it from outside. But we need to create the environment, for create environment for these women or these men to feel comfortable to talk about it. We're also enlisting the support of the religious leaders, so that in our religious community, that these religious leaders can be supportive. But we've also seen where the pastor is the one that is abusing, the wife. There's a video that we have, there was no time for me to show it or even show you, where the children were not the one telling the pastor, their own father, to stop hitting their mother, instead for the father to hit them. So it's very sad. And this is epidemic in our community. People don't talk about it. That silence and secrecy, we need to break that. So what we've also tried to put together is to embrace the culture of celebrating our men, especially Father on Father's Day. How we can celebrate those men that are out there supporting their women, their children in our environment. It's not easy. So we in the Nigerian Nurses Association, we try to celebrate our Nigerian men. We actually gave them a title, husband, HON, husband of a nurse. And we celebrate them because it's not easy for you to be a husband of a nurse. After a nurse has gone to work for 12 hours coming home, she's tired, she needs help, she needs support. So we're encouraging the men to be supportive, to build a supportive environment. Because we've seen a family where the woman come back home after 12 hours, and now she is the one that has to go back to the kitchen. And when she says she's tired, the man don't want to hear it. He say, oh no, you have to do the work as a man. I'm not supposed to touch that. So there are a lot of issues, and I'm happy that we're doing this. And I want to thank you, Mr. Benga, for starting this. This should be an interactive session where we will have a discussion goes on, where we can, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can have a few minutes to have discussions, questions, and answer sessions. But this is what we are seeing in our community and what we are doing in our community to support our community so we can help reduce domestic violence in our community. Thank you.
Dr. Grace, I want to honor and thank you so much, for sharing with us. And also, first off, thank you for your leadership and the work your organization and you personally do for the community, particularly in this area of domestic violence. My jaw was dropped just listening to the level of atrocities, committed in silence in the culture. And very few organizations or individuals are talking about it, are shining a light on it. So we really thank you so much for your leadership on this. Do we have any questions for Dr. Grace? Please feel free to unmute yourself if anyone want to come to the mic to ask questions directly. She can take 1 or 2 questions before she goes. You can also chat in your questions too, if that works better for you. Let me unmute. I actually unmuted everyone. That might be. Also, Attorney Melvin, do you also have any questions connected to your presentation that Dr. Grace can touch on before she leaves?
No, not right now.
Okay. Okay, so let me check the chat box. Okay, so Dr. Grace, I want to thank you so much. I guess my question would be, in terms of the research on the cultural piece, are there any form of conclusion that you've come across or you've come to in during that transition from Nigeria to America, like helping folks understand the dynamics and the rules and the culture of where they are getting into, almost like an orientation before things get to a crisis level? Are there any kind of solutions you've been able to come up with in that regard?
Right. Thank you for the question. I think we divided it into two sessions or two segments. One was for the men, to have the men going into that relationship, the expectation. And then the women, when they come in, and that is the area we focus on, the culture shock that is there, that when you come in here, I think majority of the women, when they come in, realizing that you have to do the house chores and also go to work, so it was a bigger problem there. Because most of them, when they're at home, they have help. They have the happy hand, they either have the niece or nephew, whoever is living with them, to help. But now they have the children here, they are alone with the husband. So the stress level was very huge. So that background of helping to provide support, how can they get support? How can they balance work and the children? How they can balance the work and relationship, and how they can also build a family. So those are the workshops that we provide for the newly migrated individuals, because some of them, they come in not as nurses, then they have to go to school. So now we're trying to get them when they are in school, before they even become nurses. So what is it they expect, or what is going to happen, so that culture shock is addressed before they get there. So those activities and programs at different chapter levels, we're doing that. So now each chapter of the organization, we have about 21 chapters. Each chapter now have domestic violence committee, and then we also have a national committee. So that is very helpful, because every month when they meet, this is being discussed and programs are put in place, to address challenges. And during these meetings, then the interaction is the key. So people are bringing up what they are going through, they're able to speak up. And when they speak up, so you have other people, it's like a group, support group. So when they speak up, they get the help. So they might think they are the only one going through it, but somebody else is witnessing the same problem. So that is why we encourage individuals to speak up, so that we can provide support, in whatever situations they are going through. So yes, we have those programs put in place, so the men's voice. So we wanted the men's voice. The men's voice about domestic violence is also important. So during our conferences, we have the men's session where they talk about their own. What are they going through as an individual that is married to a nurse? What is it you go through in the house? So when they bring all this information, we're able to look at it and then come up with areas, come up with programs that will help to reduce, those situations that comes up. And that is the way we're addressing it right now during monthly meetings that the chapters are having, and then discussing, especially work. What we really found out, two areas is that work balance, life work balance was a key, not able to balance the work, the relationship, at home. And then two, now another area is the culture. We saw, but that it depends on certain culture, where the man still feels that choice at home is only for the woman, and not supportive. So we found that being a conflict, a big conflict in the relationship. Because now you have the woman acting out, I'm tired, I'm the only one working. Because sometimes when they are in some situation, we find out once they marry these women, bring them to America, they stop working. Now this woman is now the ATM machine. So stop working So now she's the one working, and you still expecting you home all day. And this woman comes home, you still expect the woman to go to the kitchen, because in our culture, it's the woman that's supposed to put the food on the table. You know, so there are a lot of issues that we find here and there that we are addressing from providing intervention to address those findings from the research.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Grace. Thank you for spending this time with us. We're going to be continuing this conversation, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the center. We really appreciate you so much for sharing with us. We are also going to be sharing the contact for NANNA to the network for those who want to reach out to the network and see how they can be a part of the work that you're doing. Thank you, ma'am. At this point, I want to have the honor to introduce our next speaker, Attorney Melvin Jarrett, who's going to speak to us on the immigration component of this topic. Melvin, the microphone, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Benga. I appreciate that. And I want to also echo everything that you said, Benga, and applaud Dr. Grace here for bringing awareness to domestic violence and immigration, how it might impact immigration, and applaud just all the hard work that your organization has done, Dr. Grace, because that is a lot of work. You spent a lot of time putting together the information. As I was doing my research and preparation for this workshop, I came across some information from the National Resource Center. And this is one of the pieces that they put out about awareness plus action equals social change. And that's exactly what NANNA has been working on, and what Dr. Grace and everybody that has been working with our organization has been doing, because it's very important to bring social change to issues like domestic violence. And you can't have social change without awareness, and you also cannot have it without action. That's the big part of it. If we can go to the next slide. Yes, these are some other strategies to help bring social change, awareness, and action to domestic violence. I really was happy that I heard Dr. Grace talk about domestic violence being across gender, across all races, all socioeconomic, and all of that. I have a short story that I'll tell, and then I'll move on real quick. I had a friend when I used to work in the engineering construction field, a very smart fellow, you know. He had 2 bachelor's degrees and he had 2 master's degrees, very smart guy. He lived 2 hours away, so he would come up here on the weekends and work. And then he would go back to his family during the week. And when he come up on the weekends, he would be, you know, kind of quiet, reserved to himself, and very hard worker, very always active, you know, but he would be very reserved. Towards the end of the week, he would be more active, more alive. Well, I should say towards Wednesday, Thursday. Then come Friday, when it's time to go home, he was slipping back into reserve. And so one day I asked him, I said, hey, we'll call him Cedric. I said, Cedric, you always come in on Monday and you kind of seem down, you know, is everything okay? Are you depressed? And he's, oh, no, everything's fine, you know. And so over the years, I kept watching and seeing different little signs. And one day I said, hey, look, I always noticed that, you know, you're kind of down when you come. You know, when people ask you to go out to lunch with us or things like that, you're a little bit reserved. Sometimes you have, like, you know, an injury on your face or something like that. He said, oh, no, you know, that's just work from the yard and things like that. But eventually he told me, he said, yeah, you know, my wife, she's just trying to make a better person out of me. She, you know, sometimes, you know, hits me with things or this and that. And I said, Cedric, that is domestic violence. You have to report it. And I try to talk to him to try to get help and point to different organizations, but it can be difficult to recognize. And again, Dr. Grace, you pointing out that it's across gender, it's across socioeconomic sectors. It's everywhere, you know. I'm proud to be working with the Nigerian Center to try to make immigration, the path to immigration to the United States, a little bit easier. And we all know how things like domestic violence can exacerbate things like immigration. So I really want to applaud you for bringing awareness to that. If we can move on to the next slide, I'll move on to the next one, please. There should be another one titled What Happens to Your Immigration Status? Correct. Thank you. All right. So I'm a little old school, so I do things the old way. I'm from community college teaching. I taught for a few semesters at community college, so I kind of like the blackboard writing things on. I don't know if I'll be writing today, but maybe not. So what happens to your immigration status if you're convicted? If you're a perpetrator of domestic violence, what happens to your immigration status? Well, some of the consequences can be very grave. Number one, you may be deported. And that's not something to take very lightly. You may definitely be deported. The reason why is because domestic violence is considered a crime of moral turpitude, meaning it affects things like whether or not you're an honest person or things like that. So it's considered a crime of moral turpitude. So it's very serious to take the consideration that you may be deported. You may also be declared ineligible for citizenship at a later time. You may be ineligible for a green card or even another visa change or change in status or things like that. If you're seeking asylum from this country, you will be denied that asylum if you're convicted of domestic violence. All right. And you may also be barred from re-entering the United States. That's a big thing. That's a big deal. A lot of people migrate to this country to try to increase their economic situation, provide a better situation for their families, for themselves. All of that can be definitely affected. Okay. One question was, will the deportation be immediate? Not usually, not right away. Not usually. Usually, if you're charged with a domestic violence or a violent crime, your immigration status will be placed on hold. The local authorities and the immigration service will communicate. And once your case has been decided, and if you're convicted, then it will be turned over to immigration. You will serve your time in jail, whatever time that is. And once that is over, you'll be turned over to the immigration service. And then you will have to face whatever consequences they decide at that time. But yes, it won't happen right away. But there's one thing to be careful of. There are two exceptions to this. If you are an undocumented person in the United States who came to the country outside of the legal channels, you will be subject to immediate deportation. That would accelerate the process. Also, if you violate a protective order, meaning you're a perpetrator of domestic violence, and you go out and violate the domestic order where the court says you need to stay away from this person, you need to not call this person, you need to not have any contact with this person, you do any of those things, or let's say you were supposed to pay some type of damages for the violence that you perpetrated because you damaged some type of property. Well, guess what? You will be immediately deported. Your options, if you are charged with a domestic violence crime, and I know I'm talking about the perpetrator first, but because it's important, like Dr. Grace said, it's not only men that are perpetrators, women can also be perpetrators of domestic violence. So we have to talk about it on both sides. But if you're charged with domestic violence, the best thing that you can do is try to have the charges dropped or dismissed. That's your best option. If you can't have the charges dropped or dismissed, your next best option is to try to reach a plea agreement for a lesser reduced charge that is not domestic violence. Like I said, domestic violence is considered a crime of moral turpitude by the Immigration Service. Now, if you can't get the charges dropped and you can't reach a plea agreement and you happen to go to trial, do your best to be acquitted. All right, if we can move on to the next slide. Now, if you've been a victim of domestic violence, like some of the nurses that Dr. Grace talked about, what can you do? Do you have to depend on this person that brought you to this country and is now saying, oh, I'm keeping your papers. You can't do anything. Oh, I can call and have you deported. You can't do anything. That's absolutely not true. The reason why VAWA, which is a law that was created for this, specifically for this situation, to assist victims of domestic violence and extreme cruelty, was to assist in that situation. VAWA allows you to self-petition, meaning you can do the application yourself without that sponsor, and get your status yourself. There would also be a path to citizenship. There are also other laws that also address this domestic violence issue. The Cuban Adjustment Act is also another act that also addresses domestic violence, and also the Asian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act is also another one that addresses domestic violence and allows you to continue the process as a self-petitioner. All right, let's move on to the next one, please. All right, yes, that's the one. All right, so there's another option that you have. We have several laws, several paths that we can discuss when you come to the Nigerian Center for a clinic or either listening to one of these workshops. But they're also what they call T visas and U visas. All right, there's a distinction to be made. A T visa is for those that are victims of trafficking in the United States, while a U visa is for somebody that's a victim of a crime in the United States. The difference is for a T visa, you have to be a victim of human trafficking. One important thing to note about both of these, if you are going to apply for either one, a T visa or a U visa, you have to be assisting law enforcement. You have to be, the crime has to be reported, and you have to be making an effort to assist law enforcement in solving the crime or getting an arrest in some way. Now, that does not mean they have to catch the perpetrator or anything like that. It just means you have to be assisting. And also, you have to get a certification, and that certification can come from either a law enforcement officer, a state prosecutor. In DC, it would be the office of the Attorney General, and or a judge. A judge can also sign your certification, and then you can move forward with a Form I-119 petition for a U visa. All right. Now let's move on to the next screen. So if you happen to be a victim of domestic violence, what can you do? And these are some of the things that we can help you with when you come to the center, to immigration clinic, because sometimes people feel like they have no avenue, they have nothing they can do. This person is saying, hey, I got control over you, but that is absolutely not true. Do not be afraid. If you're a victim of domestic violence, go ahead and call 911, report it to the police. Once you report it to the police, you need to collect all of your evidence. That means all of your witnesses, all of your pictures, all of your videos, anything that you have that can show what happened, any injuries, anything that you can collect from the incident, you need to collect. If you went to the hospital, at some point you need to get a hospital report. Be honest with the people at the hospital, tell them exactly what happened. If you call the police and the police came, get the police report. Have that ready when you either go to one of the centers for assistance, or when you stop by the center, to the Nigerian Center, and ask for help for us to direct you. go ahead and bring all of that information with you. That is all of what you're going to need if you have to go to court to get what they call a protective order, a civil protective order. You can also reach out to some of the organizations that help victims of domestic violence in DC. The ones that I know about are right here in DC. I'm not sure about too many of the other ones. DC Safe is one of the bigger organizations, and what they can do is, if you're in a situation where you need to get out of the house, they can help you provide temporary housing. If your door was damaged, they can help you find somebody to fix your door and get it paid. A wide range of services that they can provide for domestic violence victims. And they're not the only organizations. We will have some of those organizations and pamphlets for you if you happen to come to a domestic violence or an immigration work clinic. All right. Also, like I said, you can also seek a protective order, a civil protective order. A civil protective order does carry criminal penalties if it's violated. Remember, I said if a perpetrator violates a protective order, they can be immediately deported, and that's what this is. It carries a civil penalty and a criminal penalty, meaning you can go to jail if you violate this order. So you gather up all your evidence, you talk to an attorney, or you can go down to the courthouse yourself and file for a temporary protective order, and you would get what they call an ex parte hearing in front of a judge immediately, in front of a judge or a magistrate immediately. And that is for you to present whatever evidence you might have right then and there without the other party present to get an emergency temporary protective order. That order will only last for 2 weeks, usually about 2 weeks. And then you have to go back to court and present your evidence with the other party present. They have to be given the opportunity to be heard. So you have to serve them with the documents that you filed at the court, and then they can either show up or they can not show up. If they decide not to show up, the consequences can be grave, because then the court will issue a warrant for their arrest, a bench warrant for their arrest, because they did not show up to court. And if they have an immigration status, that's immediately in jeopardy, because now if they get caught by the police, they will be going to jail and stand a great chance of being deported. Okay. Also, victims of, for the civil protection order, first you have to establish in DC that you're a DC resident. Also, you have to be eligible for a protective order, there has to be some type of close relationship, usually an interpersonal relationship where, let's say, boyfriend, girlfriend, dating, something like that. And also an intimate relationship, a sexual relationship, an intra-family relationship, meaning husband and wife, children, siblings, brother, sister, things like that. So once you can establish that, then you can move on to the next step and present your evidence to prove that you're a victim of a criminal act. And there's several that can help you get a protective order. If you're a victim of assault, if there was a threat made against you, if you were a victim of stalking, sexual abuse, interfering with the call to enforcement for help. A lot of people don't realize that. If you're trying to make a phone call on the phone, somebody snatches the phone out of your hand, that is a crime. That is interfering with a call to law enforcement for help. And you can get a civil protection order for that. Also, voyeurism, the unlawful disclosure of personal things like revenge porn. Destruction of property is also a crime that can get you a protective order. Also, parental kidnapping can also get you a protective order. All right. So those are some of the things that are available right here in DC. If you happen to come to a clinic, and you're a victim of domestic violence, we can help guide you and even direct you to where to go down to the courthouse, get the process started for a protective order. I'm a licensed attorney, so I may be able to direct you to other attorneys that I worked with that I currently work with that may be able to assist you in things that, maybe I can assist you, or the Nigerian Center cannot assist you, or we don't have capacity or something like that. But do not be afraid if you're a victim of domestic violence. Do something about it. Let somebody know there are options. You don't have to be afraid that you're going to be deported because the perpetrator has decided that they don't want you here anymore, or that they need to control something about you. All right. At this point, if anybody has any questions, I know we're running a little bit late, but if anybody has any questions, go ahead. And if we don't have answer the questions here, definitely come down to the center during one of the clinics, and we'll get your questions answered. Benga?
Yes. Do we have any questions for Attorney Melvin? While the questions come up, you can either chat your question or mute yourself. Two questions I have. Dr. Grace talked about, would those nurses Dr. Grace talked about, would they qualify eligible for the the T visa, would that be considered a case of trafficking if if there's a false manipulation for financial gain? That is one. And number two, the second question in terms of culture, what would be your recommendation, or how would you address a question about cultural sensitivity and interpretation? So maybe there is a domestic dispute. It may not have reason to the point of domestic violence, and language could be misinterpreted. How would recommend people go about reporting that, seeking mediation before really escalating this to domestic violence? Or it could be that, but does culture play any role in that? And could victims of those who are forced into financial gain, like the nurses Dr. Grace talked about, would they be eligible for the T visas?
The T visa is for human trafficking, engaging in sexual acts, illegal acts, and things like that. So if it crosses that line into something illegal and the person is brought over for that purpose, then yes, they will be eligible for it. But if they're a victim of domestic violence between the person that brought them here, their domestic partner, the other option is a U visa. With both, you have to be assistant law enforcement. But if it's just domestic violence between yourself and your partner, then your U visa is probably your better option. Again, that's something that it has to be decided based on the situation. So if somebody comes down to a clinic, we will be able to discuss it a little bit further and see exactly which one works better for them. Now, about the cultural sensitivity, a lot of the thing that people have to realize when they leave another country and come here, and I encountered this a few times already myself, is that in your country, you control what goes on in your family. In this country, when you come here and you decide to involve the state with complaints, then you lose some of that control. But what you gain is the protection. But the difficult part is having people that are not aware of the culture of those other countries understand the situation that you're in. As Dr. Grace pointed out, in some countries, the families get involved. So, you're married, you came over here, this person came over here, spent all this money to help you get you over there. And now you're saying, that you want to do this or that. Everybody has a right to change their mind, but in some cultures, that might be an issue. My approach to that is to take my time and understand everybody and listen to exactly what you're trying to say, because it might be make a difference. Some people ask me, say, well, how much experience do you have as an immigration attorney or as an immigration? And I say, well, I'm 49 years old. My family migrated to this country when I was approximately 8 years old. So I have about 41 years of experience in immigration. I've been through the process myself. My family has been through the process, and I understand that when an immigrant gets in front of a judge at a hearing or a customs officer and has to explain, their situation, or even just an attorney that's trying to assist them, it makes a difference if that attorney can understand where you're coming from, the culture that you're coming from, the hesitations that you might have in discussing certain things, and the reason why you don't want to make certain decisions that they're asking you to make. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, it does. Do we have any other questions for the speaker? And you can either unmute yourself or you can chat your question to the chat box. I don't believe we have any other questions. So I want to thank everyone and thank our speakers for today for graciously. Oh, we have a hands up.
Yes,
Okay.
I had a quick question. Sorry. So I was wondering if from your experience you've had any kind of not retaliation, but situation where folks advise their friends to plead for being victims of domestic violence, even though that's not the case. How has that affected this process for those who actually are victims? And is there a way we could guard against that within the community?
So I think what you're asking me is somebody making a false accusation of domestic violence.
Yes, so we've had situations where folks say, I went through this process, you should as well, even if you're not experiencing domestic violence, to get the benefits that come with it. And I was just wondering if there's been any issues for folks due to that trend, and how can we within the community guide against it so that folks that are actually victims can be able to successfully go through this and come out on top.
I would advise against lying and be straight about it. Lying, misrepresenting, put down anything false or any application, any government application, any documentation, any disclosure that you make into the government. If you lying to get a protective order for an immigration issue or something like that, I recommend against it. That is absolutely, if you get caught doing that, you will be deported. That's a crime of moral turpitude. And once you're lying to the court, to the government, because when you go to an immigration hearing, you're going in front of a court, the immigration court. You don't want to take the chance and lie in front of it. It can be as simple as trying to think of a good example. So let's say you were a victim, a true victim of domestic violence. And let's say many years ago, let's say you've been here for, well, not even many years ago, let's say many months ago, you've been here for 8 months. And now the person is acting up. So you report it to the police and they say, well, has this ever happened before? And you say, oh, yes, we had an argument when I first moved to this country and the police were called and he hit me. And let's say on the police report, it says there was no physical violence, there was nothing, there was an argument. Well, that's a lie. And if you did not remember that there was a police report or did not happen to look at that police report, and you're going to tell somebody else or try to get a protective order with something like that, then they can establish that you lied. And now you've committed a crime of moral turpitude. And if you're under oath in court, in front of a tribunal, that's considered perjury, and you can go to jail for it. So in a situation like that, that's the last. Don't even look at that option. Put that out of your mind completely. Do not ever lie to the government, especially in immigration. You will not be allowed in this country. You will be. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Do we have any other question? No, we do not. This has been such a great presentation and session. I just want to quickly go through one or two announcements before we officially close out the session. If you give me 1 minute, I'll be able to do that. Share back the screen. Particularly, I want to mention that as the speaker talked about, we are opening the very first immigration clinic for the community in Washington, D.C. starting in October. I believe our first session is going to start October 4th. You'll be getting more information about that. And you are able to walk in or call in to make an appointment to speak to lawyers. We have an in-house attorney now, Attorney Melvin Jarrett will be one of the main lead attorneys, and there'll be other attorneys who they'll be supporting, so you can have access to the clinic. Tomorrow is our Access to Capital workshop. We're going to have Vicki Davis. Vicki Davis used to be vice president of two of the very top financial institutions in the country. And she's a financial expert. She'll be talking about understanding how personal and business credit really works. In that event, we are also going to be talking about Nigerian Center Micro Lending Program for those who have a need for financial capital for their business, or also just to build credit. As we know, entrepreneurship for many of us in our community is not just a luxury or an aspiration, it's a survival strategy. So and access to capital becomes a barrier. So you can please feel free to join us for that. On the 4th of October, we are hosting the press conference. The Mayor of Washington, D.C. is declaring October 1st as Nigerian American Day. In Washington, D.C., you're going to be receiving that press release on the 1st of October. So I guess this is a breaking news. And we are holding a press conference in Washington, D.C. Towards that. And that is when we are going to officially launch our immigration clinic. This conversation is being recorded, so the video will be made available to those who are here and who could not join us. And feel free to reach out to us at any time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Attorney Melvin Jarrett. Thank you, Mrs. Dr. Grace, and thank you for joining us today. I'll see you again.
All right.